So, good morning, Rom. Very happy to have you here in Goa.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be in Goa.
I know. So lucky to, really meet you and do an interview. So, Rom, first off, tell us about your first encounter with a snake and your mom's reaction to it, because,
Yeah, that's a telling point in my history, really, because I was about 4 years old and I was with my little friends and we were all turning over stones, and the purpose of that was to collect worms because we wanted to go fishing, okay? So we were collecting worms to go fishing. Then suddenly these kids turned over one rock and said, "Snake, snake!" And they started pounding this thing to death. And I got, I was just amazed that these guys are killing something. I'd never seen anyone kill anything in my life before. And I brought it home actually on the end of a stick, this poor dead snake. And my mother and my sister both were very appalled, They said, "Wow, I mean, how could they do that? We know there's no dangerous snakes here. This is in northern New York State, okay? This wasn't in India yet. That only comes later." So at the age of 4, you can imagine the impression that it made on me. Anyway, we continued. I went fishing and did all this. And a few days later, I turned over a rock and I found a snake, which is called a milk snake, another non-venomous snake. This time my friends weren't with me to kill it, and I picked it up. Now, smart or not, I picked it up and it didn't bite me and nothing. It was quite nice. I said, "Wow, what a beautiful little thing." I took it home, and I can't really remember the words or my mother's face, but I know what she said because she told me later, "What a gorgeous snake." Now I think, click, my brain sort of clicked into gear then. My mother saying something is gorgeous means it's gorgeous. And I already knew it was, because that's why I picked it up. It moved so beautifully, and it was so gentle. It didn't try to do anything. It may have been frightened of me at the beginning, but as soon as I picked it up and handled it gently like that, it was perfectly okay. So it was my friend. And her reaction made all the difference. And I think it's set me on a course which is where I am right now.
I know, quite an amazing story, really. Yeah. What a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Then tell us about that pet python that you had in your Kodaikanal school. Now that you're in India and you're in the Kodaikanal school. Yeah. How did you keep it, and what was the reaction of the school authorities?
Well, this was many years later, of course. I'm now in my 8th or 9th or 10th grade in Kodi School, which is now called Kodaikanal International School. Then it was called Highclere School, a missionary school up in the Palni Hills. And I had bought this at Crawford Market. Actually, a friend of my mother's bought it for me for 100 rupees in the animal dealer section of Crawford Market. And I decided I would take it to Kodi School. I don't know how that decision came about, but I know my mother didn't want to keep it at home. We then lived in Bombay. So I took it to Kodaikanal and I installed it under my bed. Now, I knew that no pets were allowed, first of all. And whether it's a snake or a dog or a cat or whatever, in this school there are no pets allowed. So I had to keep it a secret. So my roommate and my close friends knew about it, but they kept their mouth shut. They wouldn't tell anybody. The ladies who cleaned all the dorm rooms and all that, I gently told them, "Please don't disturb the box under my bed." I didn't tell them there was a snake in it. They would freak out. I just said, "Please don't disturb my box. They're my things." And surely they didn't bother. So there were two things that I had to do. I had to bring it out to sun itself so it could warm up, which we did by pretending we were lying in the sun, and next to us there would be a blanket, and underneath the blanket would be the python, getting warm, and how to feed it. That I figured out very quickly. Behind the kitchen was the garbage dump, and there were plenty of rats there, and I learned how to set traps. So I set traps for him and kept him well fed. And in the cold weather, he didn't eat too much. So this went on for quite a long time. I would take him back to Bombay on vacation, bring him back to Kodaikanal. So for several years, the authorities didn't know a thing about it. Fantastic.
Oh, wow. Catch someone doing it now.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. So now I go back to the US, and you have to tell us about your guru, the American herpetologist, and what you learned from him.
Yeah, well, let me tell you,
Yeah.
the story begins even further back into those Python days.
Yeah.
I read about this guy called William Haast, Bill Haast, who created the Miami Serpentarium with his wife Clarita Haast. And this is the largest venom production center in the world, and he was handling king cobras, and there was a magazine article with pictures of him. And I thought, wow, this is the kind of guy who I'd love to meet someday. So I wrote him a letter, in those days, the aerogram. This is 1957, okay? We're talking a long time ago. And fantastic, he writes back a typed letter, which I still have, saying, wonderful to hear about you, that you and your love for snakes, and the fact that you read about our serpentarium in this magazine. And if you ever come to the United States, make sure you come and visit us. That was enough for me. So it was almost 8 or 9 years later. I finished high school. I went to America. I mean, there are too many stories in between. This will go on for 2 hours if I tell you all the stories. But I was on my way coming back to America after finishing 1 year of college and doing some other jobs, getting drafted into the U.S. Army. All these things happened. On my way back to India, I stopped in Miami and went to this Miami Serpentarium to meet the man who became my guru. Coincidentally, the guy who was taking people on guided tours in the Serpentarium had just quit. And they were looking for some young guy like me who loved snakes and knew something about snakes. And they offered me a job. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, how many lucky things could happen to one kid? I was probably, 20 years old that time, 20, 21. And I said, yeah, of course I'll take the job. And wonderful idea. And for the next 2 years I worked there. And this was a turning point in my life because suddenly I was a professional snake man. I was handling snakes, I was cleaning all the cages, I was getting up close and personal with cobras and mambas and all the animals, snakes from Africa and all over the world. So it was a very exciting moment for me. And my guru, Bill Haast, even though he was not a guy who was open about conversation and talking, and you couldn't ask him questions and expect an answer. He was a very quiet man. You could watch what he was doing and learn from him. And this is what I did. I just imbibed whatever I could from just watching him. And not only me, the other couple of guys who worked with me were the same crazy guys as I was. And they went on to do the same stuff that I've been doing all my life too. So we were very heavily influenced by this man, Bill Haast. He was an incredible man. And he lived to 100 years old, by the way.
Wow. What a lovely story, yeah. You in the last interview that you gave here in Goa, you mentioned that you rode, you took a large snake on your lap, literally on a motorbike. You had to save it. And so tell us about that, what kind of snake it was and that whole incident.
Yeah, that's a cool story because it was shows a bit of my insanity, but also my persistence in doing what I love to do. I was catching snakes at that time, and to sell them actually. I could be called a commercial snake hunter. And I was in the Florida Everglades, and I was walking through the Everglades, and I saw what was the largest eastern diamondback rattlesnake I had ever experienced in my life. I knew they grew so big, but I never thought I'd find one. Here is a 6-foot-long eastern diamondback rattlesnake coiled up. So I caught her and put her in a bag. It's a bit of a long story of how I got her into the bag carefully without getting bitten and all that. But my only transport was my BSA motorcycle. And I started thinking, okay, that was a bit stupid. I bagged it up. Now how are we going to carry it back to the Serpentarium where I was going to take it? So I thought, okay, I can safely do it this way. I can put several snake bags on my lap, and when I sit on the motorbike, I can take the bag and put it on my lap and then carefully drive down the highway back to the Miami Serpentarium. But always with this thought in my mind, okay, I've put several bags on my lap, but the snake has fangs almost 1 inch long, So if it really wanted to bite, it could. Now, there's no reason why it should bite. I mean, but nonetheless, the thought is there. And when you've got a 6-foot diamondback rattlesnake on your lap and driving a motorbike, you hope that it doesn't bump too much or scare it or make it bite. So there was this 1 hour drive back while I was holding my breath most of the way. But I managed to get there okay. I'm still alive. Everything was okay. But that's,
Quite an anecdote, yeah, really. Rom, tell us about why you came back to India. What brought you back to India in the 60s,
Yeah, okay, so I got here to India when I was 8 years old in 1951, and I was here till 1961. So that 10-year period was more or less my formative years, from the age of 8 to the age of 17. And, my mother was here, my brother, my sister. It was just natural, and my exciting adventures with snakes and getting into the forest when I was in Kodaikanal. I just loved India, and it was very natural for me to come back. I mean, I loved America also. It had very exciting places to go to, and a large part of my family was living there and still lives there. But India was, I don't know, deep inside me, and it just seemed very natural for me to come back. I have no better reason to say that.
And how did South India happen? Meaning, is it because you studied in Kodaikanal that you went to the South Indian jungles and started work?
Just to give you the outline of how that happened, since I was brought up in South India by the fact that I went to school there, that's 9 months of the year I was in school there, 3 months of the year I was in Bombay,
That's
on
right.
my vacations. So there in Bombay I learned Hindi, but in South India I learned Tamil.
Yeah.
So having learned Tamil, I had a sort of affinity to the place. But the key thing was, when I had come back to India, I started making a small venom lab out in a place called Gaimukh Bandar, which is on the Godbandar Road outside of Bombay. And I started traveling around India all the way to Calcutta, into West Bengal, and then eventually down to Tamil Nadu to collect snakes to extract venom. When I got to Tamil Nadu, I met the Eulas, this tribe of people who were catching snakes for the skin industry. And although I was against the skin industry, I was absolutely thrilled to meet people who knew so much about snakes and how to find them. And since I had already learned Tamil when I was a young kid, I immediately had a friendship with some of these tribal people. And I mean, they were more akin to me and closer to me than all my city friends, obviously, because my city friends thought I was slightly insane. And and it was just this friendship which drew me to settle for a long time in South India, and where I am still today.
Yeah. And so what is special about the Eulas? Rom, you can tell that the best,
Yeah.
What is special about them?
The Eulas, I mean, like many tribal communities, they know so much about the natural world, and now I have to admit that a lot of it is disappearing because of things like the very strong wildlife protection laws. They're not allowed to do what they used to do, and some of that is good. The fact that the snakeskin industry was closed is good because they were taking too many snakes out of the ecosystem. But at the same time, that means all their natural things that they learned are disappearing, and the young people are going for regular jobs, which is of course good for them in some ways, but the loss of their natural skills and their knowledge about nature is fast disappearing. So they are very special in that sense.
Yeah.
And I could tell you a little more about that when we went to Florida with
Yes.
the Eulas, yeah.
Yes. So you can tell us right now, because at the Goa Literature Festival, you mentioned, you showed us a slide about taking two Erula men all the way to Florida to catch pythons, because they were the Burmese python had become an invasive species, right?
Right.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, because having known the Everglades, having spent 2 years in Florida and hunting snakes in the Everglades and going out, and as we used to go hunting snakes, we would see rabbits scurrying back and forth, we would see possums and raccoons and all these native mammals. And then I heard these horrifying stories in recent years after the year 2000, 2005, that time, people were starting to write about the fact they weren't seeing any more of these mammals, but they were seeing lots and lots of pythons. And these pythons had been released by people who had bought baby pythons as pets. You know, when they're small, this size, they're beautiful little pets. And then they would grow large, and someone in the family would say, hey, this snake is too big, get rid of it, get rid of it. And they would just chuck it out into the Everglades. These are all Florida pet owners, you know, people who like snakes. But they didn't realize what was going to happen, because these pythons love this swampland called the Everglades in Florida. It's a million acres, the size of the Sundarbans, huge swampland, very dense vegetation, full of juicy mammals to eat. And these pythons are going crazy. They're just breeding like rabbits, I should say. But I mean, that's an ironic thing to say, because they're feeding on all the rabbits and all the local mammals there. So someone estimated that there are more than hundreds of thousands of pythons there, and they're trying to control them. They've caught, now, to date, they've caught about 18 or 20,000 pythons and killed them. But the local snake hunters are good. They're very good snake hunters, but they're not as good as the Eulas. And when I communicated with people at the University of Florida and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, I told them that our Eulas could teach some of the local snake hunters some of the fine arts of finding snakes, by finding the shedded skin, by finding the scats, by finding the tracks where snakes go, and finding where the pythons lay their eggs. So in order to do this, we'd have to bring Eulas over from India, which we did. My wife Janaki and I came over with 2 Eulas, Masi and Vadivelu. Over a period, a couple of months we were there, they caught 32 pythons. One of them was 16 feet long, another 13 feet, a lot of 10-footers. And unfortunately, the local snake hunters, they were interested in what the Eulas did and how they did it, but they much preferred driving around and finding the snakes that crossing the roads, but not getting down into the bushes the way the Eulas did it. And I still think that's a problem. They're never going to solve this problem until they get right down into the bushes, find where the snakes are making their nests, laying their eggs, and getting all those snakes out of there. It's a almost impossible task. So I hoped the Eulas could have helped them.
Yeah, wonderful. That was a fascinating video also that we saw that day. Rom, I'm tempted to ask you to tell us. You did mention one encounter with the snake where you got bitten, and you had a bad time, really. You want to talk about that, or you tell us about the most challenging situation in the wild that you have faced with a snake, with a venomous snake?
I can go way ahead to the year 2017, 2018, no, 2019 actually, since we're jumping around anyway in our talk. I started working as a consultant to a oil palm company, a palm oil company in Indonesia, in Kalimantan. The part of the island of Borneo that belongs to Indonesia is called Kalimantan. And part of my consultancy work there was to capture king cobras in their plantations, install small radio transmitters, and study the movements of the king cobras, and just learn more about their behavior and their ecology. In order to do that, you first have to catch the king cobra. And I'm a pretty experienced catcher. But I have to admit, I'm getting older now. I'm 81 now, and then I was like, about 77, 78. And these guys called me up. I was in the plantation. These are vast plantation, 3,000 hectares, huge plantation. So we drove quickly to the spot, and I was told it's under the palm fronds. And I went and looked and saw it. It was definitely there. I got my snake hook out. I took it out very carefully. Usually they don't react too violently, they're scared because this massive human being has come and they don't know whether they're going to get killed or whatever. So they react by trying to get away or sit up and spread a hood and look as menacing as possible. But they are frightened, totally frightened. This one, he might have been frightened, but he was really defensive and just sort of charged at me, and so I had to hold him back and charge at me and hold him back, and finally got him into the bag. The whole thing was captured on video by two young guys who were with me, sort of assistants, and they showed me the video afterwards, and I got to admit, this old man is getting too slow to catch king cobras, because at least 3 occasions in that video I almost got bitten. I could see. I didn't notice it when I was handling it, because I'm concentrating on watching it and, very, very concentratedly getting him so that I don't hurt him and he doesn't hurt me. But seeing those videos made me realize, man, catching king cobras is not for old people.
Or for young people.
Yeah, for young people it's okay, because when I was a youngster and I trained some guys to do this, and they're doing it perfectly safely and not getting bitten. So I quit.
Because I'm calling you 81 years young. That's why.
Yeah.
So finally, I'm going to ask you, lay people like us, what is your message? How should we best live and live and let live with snakes? In our neighborhood, in Goa especially, we have snakes in our gardens and in the neighborhood. How should we respect them and see that we don't harm them and don't get harmed?
Yeah, I think the first point is to get, if people are interested, and they should be, and most people are interested, particularly in Goa and places where there's a lot of wild country around us. I mean, even right here, although it's a semi-urban area, there are plenty of trees, plenty of bushes, plenty of snakes around. Learn what species of snakes there are here and how to identify them. There are only 4 really very dangerous snakes, which are here: cobra, crate, Russell's viper, and saw-scale viper. So most people can easily say crow, pigeon, sparrow, myna. I mean, these are things that are easy to... Snakes, I admit, are a little bit faster than these birds, and they get out of the way. But it's fairly easy to learn to identify what snakes you have around. And when these snake rescuers come around, I would always, and most of them are getting the idea now, there's no need to remove the non-venomous snakes. If a rat snake is there, or a water snake, or any of these other, like the bronzeback tree snakes, leave them there.
Leave them. They'll go to their homes.
They'll be there. And removing them opens the niche for other snakes to come in, which may be a venomous snake. If there's a venomous snake around, I have to admit, yes, it very likely should be removed, preferably translocated to a nearby area which is within its home range. It shouldn't be in the house, definitely. But I think all these rescuers must understand that if they translocate a snake to a far distant site, the snake is not likely to survive. So it's very sad but true that a snake which is translocated, suddenly it's like putting you and me in the middle of Baghdad or Beijing or something like that. We don't know where to find food, we don't know where to live, we don't know what to do.
Correct. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rom. God bless you.
My pleasure, Ravi. My pleasure.